Welcome back to my third video on thread sketching. In my last video, I demonstrated how to transfer an image to canvas. Today, I will continue working on the oblation thread sketch, completing the mason jar with flowers sitting on the typing table. Using too much thread to create detail on a very small element can become messy and cause you to lose definition. This is especially true in a small greeting card size thread sketch. I will demonstrate how to use upper thread tension, stitch length, and a complementary color of thread in the bobbin to create the look you want without overstitching a mess. I will also demonstrate how to audition and add new elements into a partially or even fully completed thread sketch. At the end of the video, I will show 3 sketches in which new elements were added after all the other detail stitching was completed. I hope you enjoy. I've mentioned several times in my blog and once or twice in previous videos about auditioning elements into the thread sketch after you've got the basic design done, and maybe even after you've completed stitching. Sometimes I've completed a thread sketch and decided it needed a little more interest, so I would go back and audition and add new elements. And in order to do that, once I've decided what I want to put in, I will just draw it on a little piece of paper, and I can sometimes draw this 10 or 15 times before I get something I want, and then we'll audition it on to the thread sketch to make sure it fits. And if I feel like I've got it close to being right, I will draw it onto a small scrap piece of stabilizer and decide where I want it and position it. So I think I'm happy with this little mason jar of flowers that I'm going to put on the typing table. So I've taped this down where I want the little mason jar of flowers to be. Some things to consider when you're auditioning is, oftentimes I mentioned that I do this at the end of a thread sketch, and so I have to consider that I don't want to put it back in a water rinse, and how am I going to get rid of my stabilizer? So this is just going to be a little bit of stabilizer. I can spray it with a little water bottle, and it will not impact the paint that I've put on the canvas. The other thing is I've typically the new element might overlap stitches that I've already put down into the thread sketch. And that is the case here, but I think when I start stitching the detail of the flower, it will be just fine. So I can cover those previous stitches. Now just lifting it off and tearing it away. And you can see that there's very little left of the stabilizer. I could probably pull it out with tweezer, but I think I'll leave it there for now. And at the end, if anything's still showing, I will just spritz it with some water and it will go away. Before I try to sew the flowers into my thread sketch, I will sometimes practice on a little piece of canvas, and I have a couple of scrap pieces of stabilizer on the back so I can see if the colors and the techniques that I'm going to use will be what I want to see in my thread sketch. So what I've done is I've put my upper thread tension back to the default 5.25. I have this really nice rayon copper colored thread in my bobbin, and I have a bright yellow in my top thread. And what I'm going to try to do is pull long stitches back and forth around the middle of the flower. To see if I'm getting the color variation that I want. And I don't know if you can see, but there's the some of the very close to where the needle enters the canvas, there is some copper colored there and on both ends of the flower. So it can give you a bit of a two-tone flower doing it this way. And I'm just making long stitches, and they're not uniform. Sometimes I allow the needle to enter the canvas 2 or 3 times in the same area, just to give myself a break and contemplate where I'm going next with it. And then I'm going around the inside just to secure those stitches a little bit. And then we had another flower over here that's sort of leaning away from the front of the table. Now I've switched to a green, and I'm going to do the stems. I'm going to do this leaf up here. I've got a leaf over here. And there was another leaf over here on my picture that I'm going to put in there. And I did some similar as for the petals for the green. I have a kind of a lighter green in on top and a darker green in the bobbin. So I think you can see how that's turned out. Now we'll go in and do the center, and I'll use yet another technique for that. For the center of the flower, I'm using a goldish green rayon, and then I'm using a black polyester in the bobbin, and I still have my upper thread tension at the default 5.25, and I'm just going to take a lot of really small stitches. And you probably can't see it where you're at right now, but I'll show it to you. I'm just covering the area with these small stitches. I hope you can see that now the long stitches on the petals seem to puff up, and the center of the flower is almost a depression, and it looks like it's a little black polka dots, and it gives it a nice effect. So now with a dark rust color thread in the top and still with my black thread in the bobbin, I've returned mine to the 3.0 setting that I like to use, loosening the upper thread tension. Now I'm just going to move around the petals. And I'll do the same over here. And you can see the speed of my machine is a little bit faster, and I'm moving the fabric a little more slowly. And I think you can see the flowers now have a nice definition to them. Here is a better look at the finished mason jar and flowers. The copper thread in the bobbin added color interest without additional stitches. The two-tone flower center adds even more detail without worry of puckering or buckling the fabric. The black dots suggesting words on the typing paper were created in the same manner as the flower center. This thread sketch was featured on my blog in March of 2017, Auditioning with the Portland Street Museum. The photo that inspired this thread sketch was found on Wikimedia Commons. It is a great place to find beautiful photos, free to use as long as you attribute the work. All the background elements, including the dog, were auditioned and added after the musician and the lamppost were completed. The boy and dog in this sketch of Jameson Square were added for additional interest. As I recall, the foreground seemed empty, and I decided to add the characters after the completion of the thread sketch. I may have even had to pull a few stitches in order to fit them in. In this sketch of Portland's Burnside Bridge, the sailboat was added about mid-process, after the outline and paint, but before final stitching. Thank you for watching. I hope you'll come back for my next video in which I will stitch the planters and the plants in front of Oblation Paper and Press.